Oh boy, my friends, here comes all the people going, I told you the PS5 was underpowered. Welcome back to another video here on the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the PS5 and its GPU. Will it be underpowered? Will it actually be underpowered? Because some brand new information has come up about the PS5's GPU, and some people are freaking out about it, saying, oh my gosh, it's going to be underpowered. It's not going to be very good. This isn't really like, you know, super next gen or whatever. I don't know, man. People are crazy. Now, first off, I want to preface this by instantly, right away, immediately saying it's not underpowered. Okay, don't worry about it. It's not underpowered. The Xbox Series X, the PS5, they're both going to be incredible consoles. They're both going to feel like next gen platforms. It's going to be pretty insane. But apparently, the GPU in the PS5 is more on par with the RTX 2060 Super. Now, I don't know if other people were expecting this to be like a 3090 or something, or like a 3080 or whatever. Like, I don't know what people are expecting from a console, especially at this price point. It's never going to be as powerful as the latest, you know, GPUs that are out. But it's still really good hardware, really powerful hardware, and it's more than capable of producing some really nice visuals. Both consoles, by the way. This is not exclusive to PS5. The Xbox Series X obviously is just as capable. You know, they're very similar in hardware, so, you know, at least for third-party games, it's going to be very similar. And Sony are very good at utilizing their hardware with their first-party games. Look at The Last of Us Part 1, for example, on PS3. In my opinion, it looked like it could have been an early PS4 game. Same thing with The Last of Us Part 2 on PS4. It kind of looked like it could have been an early PS5 game. The visuals were absolutely stunning in that game. It looked really good. And Sony's, you know, first-party developers are just always really good at, you know, utilizing as much potential of a system's power and, you know, just hardware as possible. So I'm not too concerned on that front. Third-party developers, like I said, they have, you know, really good hardware to work with between the Xbox Series X and the PS5. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But you're probably wondering at this point, what am I talking about? So Digital Foundry posted a video talking specifically more about the ray tracing side of things with the PS5 and just kind of analyzing it more in depth. They do a lot of in-depth tech, like analysis videos, things like that. So, you know, that they kind of go really deep into that stuff. But excuse me, what I was basically understanding is specifically for ray tracing, ray tracing, for example, is reflections, right? So, for example, if we take a look at Spider-Man, you can see Marvel's Spider-Man, and there's this one shot that they actually showed off for the remastered version. They're talking about how it kind of looks like it's quarter resolution, so you can see that the reflection edge is more jagged. Again, if you want to watch the full Digital Foundry video, I'll link it down in the description below. So, it seems like, though, the reflections are at 1080p, which to me is not a big deal. So, if you're playing the game at 4K, the ray tracing reflections are in 1080p. They're not also in 4K, which even for a really powerful GPU, I mean, it's obviously they're capable of doing it, but even with a super powerful GPU, it would probably struggle. You'd probably have to sacrifice certain things, and you probably still couldn't do, you know, more than 30 FPS. So to achieve 30 FPS with, you know, ray tracing and all these, you know, high visual mode, I guess, whatever you want, whatever it's going to be called, because there is going to be performance mode. It's going to run at 60 FPS, but to achieve you know, at least 30 FPS or more with these kind of visuals, it makes sense that they would have to, you know, dumb down the reflections, which is not a big deal. You're not going to really notice it because these are just reflections. It's not the main part of the game. You're going to be walking by a window or something. You'll see, like, you know, a cool reflection. That's kind of ray tracing, or a puddle. But one of the other things that's kind of interesting that they noted is that if you actually look at the trees in the reflection, there's less leaves on the tree in the reflection than there is in the actual real scenario. So they kind of had to scale back some of the visuals as well. There's some visuals, so some elements actually missing in the reflection, which again, I don't think you're going to really notice if you unless you stop and really kind of nitpick and pay attention to the fine details. And a reflection in 1080p, is that a big deal? I don't think so, because a reflection is already kind of like, it's not as sharp as the real image, unless you're looking in a crystal clear mirror. Whatever, we're just kind of nitpicking at this point, right? It's not going to be a big deal. So it seems like it's quarter resolution. It's going to be you know, like if you're playing in 4K, the resolution of the reflections are going to be 1080p. And again, that's to help achieve 30 FPS. So again, part of the Digital Foundry video that they showed off is that on an RTX 2060 Super, if they're playing in native 4K with 4K ray tracing reflections, then the game has a hard time you know, rendering at 30 frames per second. It's kind of just barely making it, and it kind of dips under to like 29, 28, 27. Like, you don't want it to be starting to dip under 30 frames per second. But if you're playing at 4K native with 1080p ray tracing reflections, then it's much easier for the GPU to hold on to that 30 FPS and higher, which it was sitting around 38 FPS in Digital Foundry's example for example. That sounded weird. So again, I don't think it's a big deal. There was another scene in a different game where they showed off that actually, you know, having 4K native and 4K reflections ended up dipping as low as 20 FPS, whereas having 1080p reflections allowed it to sit more around the 32 to 30, you know, FPS range, just keeping it a little above that 30 FPS mark, which is obviously ideal. That, you know, you're going to want to hit at least 30 FPS. You don't want to start dipping under 30. A lot of people even argue, you know, they want 60. So, yeah, it's not a big deal, honestly. Now, I know there's going to be people out there that's going to say, well, dude, I want 4K resolution, and I want 4K ray tracing, and I want it all in 60 FPS, and I want, like, the craziest draw distance and the most textures, and I want, like, the craziest shadows, and this and that. It's not realistic. Even if you get the craziest, most powerful GPU for your PC, to have 60 FPS in 4K with 4K ray tracing reflections with, you know, amazing draw distance and great textures and great shadows and all that other stuff, it's not reasonable. Not right now with the technology that we have. Like, you might just barely be able to pull off, you know, some certain, like, close to that, but even then, it's not really realistic, even for the most powerful GPUs that are out there right now. You're going to end up having to sacrifice something, whether it's, you know, dumbing it down to 30 FPS as opposed to 60, or, you know, turning down those reflections, you know, from 4K down to 1080p reflections, you know, quarter scaling, if you will. You know, you're going to lose something, or some details in the reflections, or, you know, maybe you got to turn some of the textures down, or whatever it is. You know, you're going to have to sacrifice something. You cannot have, you know, like I said, 4K in 4K resolution with 4K textures and 60 FPS with, you know, amazing draw distance and textures and blah, 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 blah. It's just not realistic. So, for the PS5, it's not a big deal. The Xbox Series X, I'm assuming, will be similar. You know, like I said, these are probably things you're not even going to notice. The fact that we have ray tracing reflections at all is really, really big, and there is still a lot of detail in it. And even if it is, even if the reflections are in 1080p, again, it's a reflection. It's not your main focus of the game. So just the fact that if you walk by a puddle and you see like a super shiny reflection of yourself in it, or same thing with like a building window, that's new to consoles, and that's, you know, that's something that like is gonna look stunning. And like I said, developers, as time goes on, they're gonna learn how to utilize this hardware and architecture a lot better, and you know, they're gonna be able to utilize the power that these consoles do have, and you know, basically use every ounce of it more efficiently and more effectively. So I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's anything to worry about. But I did want to talk about that because I seen kind of like that that topic floating around a lot. A lot of people were kind of discussing it and stuff. So I wanted to kind of chime in on it and just let you guys know, don't worry about it. It's not going to be a big deal. But let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Were you concerned about this before? Had you even known about this topic? And if you did, like I said, were you concerned about it, or were you kind of thinking the same thing as me? It's not a big deal. It's still going to look amazing. And like I said, you know, developers are going to still utilize, you know, consoles to its full potential as, you know, the generation goes on. But I don't know, I'm really excited either way. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comments below. If you guys are new to the channel, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, because we do a variety of gaming content, gaming news, let's plays, gameplays, and all that good stuff. Share it with your friends so we can continue to grow this community, and make sure you guys are staying safe, staying well, my friends. I'll see you guys very soon in another video. Take care, and until then, my friends, game on.